All right, don't even lie to me. Don't even goof with me right now. When was the last time you even thought about the Razorblade? I got the impression a long, long time ago that this was just a completely terrible weapon, and it was so bad that I didn't even legitimately consider it for my top 10 base game weapons. And after doing the math, I can sort of stand by it. It ranks somewhere below the Wraith and the Siegebreaker damage-wise. It's kind of right around the Pepper Sprayer, depending on how you look at it. Its base DPS is less than the Pepper Sprayer, and the Pepper Sprayer is known as a super accurate, longer-range SMG, and it's very good because of those qualities. However, its actual base damage, even with double crit damage, the works, you know what I mean? Even with that bonus, it's not that impressive of a weapon damage-wise. So the Razorblade falls into a similar category. However, while using it, I couldn't really shake the idea that it actually performed well. Like, it was actually doing really well, and I think that's because it's a burst weapon. It's really hard to calculate the DPS of this weapon because the fire rate is listed as 7.71, and I am not certain if that's taking into account the time between bursts. Is that how many shots per second it can do while it's shooting its 3 shots? Is it accounting for that burst time, or is that how many shots it can take per second, including that delay? I'm not 100% certain, and I can't really trust the numbers because of it, because in-game, while using this weapon, I found that it was being quite good. It was like just under one-shotting like the normal zombies, because I pretty much needed to have a crit or two to one-shot those. However, I can imagine with the right group of people, or literally anybody else in my lobby, I'd be one-shotting the normal zombies and having a much easier time with mist monsters. And I do mean one-shotting, meaning like one bursting an enemy, because with a weapon like a Razorblade, it might have a 30-round mag, but if you're shooting 3 at a time, you essentially only have 10 shots before you're going to have to reload. Now, I'm using assault ammo recovery, so some of my bullets are getting saved. That's adding 31% of my bullets, to the mag. So I'm essentially getting 40 to 42 shots, which means I'm really shooting 14 bursts instead of 10. It's a really nice perk. I use them all the time. And on top of that, I'm using a reload perk just to sort of mitigate that. But my point is, you're not going to be shooting that many times before you have to reload. So if you don't eliminate an enemy in one single burst, you're going to have to take a whole other shot, which doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but it essentially doubles your work when you're shooting at a crowd of enemies, and it can really slow you down. So that's why I'm saying in-game, especially when I was critting, it kind of one-tapped most enemies, like, and the bigger, fatter enemies, when, you were able to really utilize that damage to affliction, it performed better than expected, and I can't seriously explain it. And it's also worth mentioning, I guess, that it does have a pretty good headshot multiplier. It's about a 1.5x. I'm doing about 20,000 to the head instead of 13,000, and that is significant, and it does matter. So I was feeling pretty good today. I was kind of hitting my shot. So as long as you're hitting headshots, it's actually going to be doing quite a bit more damage, and that's kind of just a good rule of thumb for every weapon in this game. Not every weapon has a headshot multiplier, but just as a gamer in general, if it is within your capabilities to be aiming for the head, you should always do so anyway. It will kill your enemies more deader. So that was basically my impression of this weapon, was thinking it was going to be bad and then being impressed. And as you can probably see from the gameplay, because it's a burst weapon, it does struggle against groups. If it was fully auto or, explosive in some way, that would help as well. I think you can get the headshot eliminations cause an explosion on this weapon, but I'm not 100% sure if I would even recommend that. And especially against single targets, it did really well. It was quite capable of taking out takers and the mist monsters in general, the fat enemies, the riot huskies, if you can even hit them. It was performing better than I expected. So if you're going to use this weapon for yourself, let's talk about the perks for it. Now, for the 6th perk, that's what I want to get into right away. I went with good old classic Affliction, because this 5th perk is really just old school. This is a base game weapon. You can research it from the collection book. You can get it from normal llamas, and all of the perks are going to be very standard with the normal weapons. And these new 6th perks, like the, stacking damage, for example, doesn't really play well with the 5th perk, because you could tell that the 5th perks were always set up to have, damage to afflicted or slowed and snared, depending on these 2 perks being like basically the only possible ones, because these other 2, the headshot ones, were not really going to be helping you much. But in the 5th perk slot, if you are going to use like each shot grants damage, I think that would give you more damage overall, obviously at the expense of the 45% going away. So I think damage to mist monsters and bosses would play best with that, but I just decided to stick with an affliction copy. I wasn't about to spend any core reperk on this weapon, and I kind of just went from there. I use nature because we're in a water zone. I've been explaining this in all my recent videos, but I think it's worth noting for the future that we are currently in an ice storm, meaning for the December, January, winter season, we are just experiencing water missions in every single 4-player, and a lot of the normal zones are water. You know, very few of them are fire or nature, so I figured making my copy nature, getting that extra damage against water, was going to be the best way to go. And going forward, if you are in a fire zone or a nature zone, then you're going to want to perk it. You know, if you're in a fire zone, make it water. If you're in a nature zone, make it fire, that kind of thing. And if you're just sort of going to go all around, you don't really care, energy would be your best bet, or physical for the Stonewood and Plankerton users. It would probably be best down there because you're not going to be experiencing as many elemental enemies. As for the rest of the perks, it's, like I said, very standard. So there is obviously, you know, the reload, crit rate, and crit damage build. That's very standard. If you decide to use Totally Rockin' Out on this, you could do double crit damage, but I don't really know that there's another way to do this, because typically my argument against crit builds is that you don't want to be rolling the dice trying to crit and banking your damage off of that. But in a 3-round burst weapon, on average, you're almost certainly going to get a crit every single time you shoot a burst out of this weapon, so I don't really see a problem with going with that. And on that same note, it's worth noting that damage to affliction only takes place after your first bullet connects, and then the other two are going to have that 45% bonus. So it's a little tricky to understand that 45% isn't always active, but it's basically active after every single first shot. Now, the other way to perk this would be to give it a fire rate and a damage. That would be mathematically on par with a crit build, but you'd be sacrificing higher damage bullets for shooting more often. And with a fire rate perk, it would squeeze down that time between bursts, so it would, you know, behave a lot more closer to a fully automatic weapon, and some of you might prefer that, but I can't really recommend going fire rate and damage when a crit build kind of just does the trick. Now, I do have a different mentality with the reload perk. I always used to recommend mag size, and I kind of stand by that, because when you're shooting a crowd of enemies, you want to just eliminate all of them and then reload, and typically a mag size perk allows you to do that, and in this case would not really be any different. But with a weapon like this, I mentioned earlier, being a burst weapon, I kind of wanted to just reload fast and get right back into the fight, and I didn't want to worry about it too much. So this time around I went with a reload perk, but I do believe a mag size perk is completely fine. If you are somebody who doesn't care about reload and doesn't care about mag size, then yes, a damage perk would give you more damage, but not really, in that you'd spend more time reloading, and that damage isn't that significant because of the way the damage stacks on top of itself. I'm not going to get into it, but that 30% damage is not going to be 30% damage, so it's not exactly going to be as nice as you want it to be. That being said, I don't have much else to say. The Razorblade impressed me. That's what I'm going to reiterate from the beginning. This weapon behaved a lot better than I thought it would be, and this video is kind of a nice one to knock out, because I do want to cover up the rest of the assault weapons on my channel, because I am apparently getting sent a gift. I'm not sure why. I don't know that this has ever happened during a best perks video, but this was... Wait, following were removed from my account. You can... I did not know that you could reverse a gift. It's honestly fun to see an old-timey weapon like this, you know, kind of revitalized in a video like mine, because I never thought I'd be pulling this weapon out again, and now that I've used it once, I might go ahead and use it again. If you guys want to support the channel, feel free to use code Mista to check out. If you guys want to become a channel member, you can use these emotes in the comments below. It really helps support me. You should follow my Twitch. My streams are awesome. Link to that in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then